Hello, my loves. It's me, Amanda. I haven't been on here for a while to talk about noisy neighbors and how to deal, but I have been healing my own relationship with neighbor noise and upsetting life circumstances in general. And I've continued to receive a lot of feedback. These videos have kind of blown up, and I'm glad because I posted them in the first place, especially considering COVID and being quarantined and a lot of us home more than normal, having our circumstances be kind of intensified. The neighbors are home as well. A lot of us didn't have our jobs. We were maybe shut in with people that weren't ideal. So there was a lot. And so the whole point of me making those videos was to kind of share what I had learned from going through that experience. And I want to help others who are suffering like I was. Like, this wasn't just like, I'm a little annoyed, right? I was suffering. And what I've understood about my situation, and what I think a lot of you struggle with as well, is that this was very much connected to earlier traumas and, like trauma in my body, right? So if trauma is less of an event as it is just something that I experienced and it lives in my body and it can get triggered by certain things. And for me, one of those triggers was noisy neighbors and loud sounds and not feeling safe where I lived and those kind of things. So there's trauma at stake here. There's PTSD, post-traumatic stress stuff. I grew up in a house with a lot of anger and fighting and like loud men yelling. And later on, as I lived my life, I got addicted to drugs and alcohol at about age 16, and I was a teenage runaway. And so I lived in a lot of really dangerous situations where people were breaking into my house because there were drug dealers there and things like that. There were abusive boyfriends. There were crazy roommates. There was all kinds of volatile shit in my life for about 17 years. And then I even found my way into jobs where there were angry coworkers slamming doors. And so by the time I started to get sober about 7+ years ago, yay, and heal some of this shit that I was just drinking over and using drugs about, all this trauma started to come to the surface to be healed. And the noisy neighbors were really good at catalyst at bringing that up to look at. So what I wanted to offer today was something for you if you're not in the place where I was, because I'm a life coach. And so a lot of the coaching that I do is mindset work. And a lot of the suffering that I was experiencing with my neighbors at the point that I was recording those videos, that a lot of my trauma had been healed already. I was very experienced and nuanced at feeling and processing my negative emotion. And so I was very much at a place where I could start to identify the thoughts that were contributing to my suffering and start to shift those, right? So that I eventually got to a place where whatever the fuck the neighbors were doing actually didn't hardly have any impact on me anymore. But I realized from listening to you all who are just discovering these videos and giving me feedback in the comments, I realized like not everybody's there yet. I had to go through this process of like learning how to feel my feelings. I went through a lot of years of therapy. I had to really understand how to create a safe place in my body to let the feelings come up and be there first and explore what was going on and what trauma was being activated, what had happened before I could try to change it, right? So I think that's where a lot of you are struggling is like, wait, I can't change it yet. I'm too fucking jacked up. Like your nervous system is too tightly wound. And that's not a problem. It just needs to be addressed before you try to think a positive thought or have a new affirmation or mantra or anything like that. That's why that shit's not working. If you have tried like to change your thinking around this, if you've even gotten coaching already, or if you've been reading self-help books and you're trying to be like more positive and loving, that's not broken. You're not broken. It's just not the right time for any of that if you're still figuring out how to process the emotion that's being triggered from all of this. So what happens when we have like an emotion or a trauma tied up with a circumstance? Normally, what I teach my clients as a coach is that our circumstances are neutral. So whatever the fucking neighbor's doing actually doesn't mean anything good or bad or otherwise until we have a thought about it, right? So we have a thought about it like, fuck that asshole. Neighbors should be quiet. That's where all our thoughts are, like the story we tell about it, right? Like, it's not fair. I shouldn't have to. I'm trying to sleep. Nobody respects me. All that stuff, right? Then that creates feelings of rage, frustration, depression, right? So And then that exhibits, all those feelings manifest themselves in our behavior. Like we can't sleep, we pound on the walls, we freak out, we yell, we call the cops, whatever, however we try to adjust, we leave, we avoid it, right? We stay over at our friend's house, or we try to move, and then the situation follows us and we're like, what the fuck? And then the result is we're miserable. And not only do we have noisy neighbors, but there's like a lot of noise in our brains, right? So that's typically the way things work. That is the way things work. And when you've healed a lot of the trauma, you're able to go in and like change the thought so you can start to feel better, right? You do this in increments. This is what I help my clients with. If you need help with this, I'm a coach. You can hire me. Shoot me a message to talk more about that. But when there's trauma involved, what happens is the circumstance, which is neutral, it happens though, and it triggers a feeling automatically. And so a lot of you who are feeling like completely out of control, completely like a victim to this thing, like you're out of control of your feelings. Like for me, when I was really in it, and if you followed me and watched my videos, you know about this, as soon as I heard even a whiff of that sound, my nervous system and my fight flight response was just like on, right? I would tense. Sometimes I would freeze. Sometimes I would get furious. So my nervous system reacts when I respond to trauma. I tend to go into fight or flight most often, or I'm sorry, freeze. I don't know. You can dabble in all of them. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. But I would tend to get really activated, like fucking angry and want to fight, or I would just like freeze up and just be like, oh my God, it's happening. And I try to listen to where it was coming from. And it was just very neurotic and like, it's sad, right? Like it was stressful. So what was happening there wasn't that I was having a thought about it. It was that it was triggering a trauma response, and it was just happening immediately. So circumstance, feeling. And then when I would start to feel that feeling, I'd have thoughts about that and then feel even worse, right? So I'd be like, oh my God, it's happening again. And I'd feel how tight my body was getting, or how angry I was getting, or how freaked out and depressed I was getting. And then I'd start to have thoughts about that. And I'd be like, oh my God, I don't feel like this. I don't want this. I don't know what to do. What's wrong with me? This happened a lot. I was like, why am I so sensitive to this? What's wrong with me, right? I started to make it this problem. Then I'd feel worse. And then it was like this vicious feedback loop, right? And it got so bad, I think I've shared this as well, that like sometimes I'd start to hear a noise and I would just start getting into that feedback loop of like, oh, these neighbors and me and my life and all this. And really it was like a sound coming from within my own apartment, like that I was making, like my dryer going, it was banging against the wall and making that sound. But I was freaking out because I thought it was triggering that trauma response, because I thought it was the neighbors and all this, right? This might sound silly to some of you, but to others of you who are going through this, you're going to be like, oh my God, thank you. I can relate, right? Because we're talking about trauma. And so there's nothing wrong with you. You're not too sensitive. You're being triggered, right? And so what we need to do, as I've said before, is we have to figure out how to unattach, cut that connector off that's connecting that circumstance, which is neighbors' music or something, or a baby screaming or someone walking too loud. We need to disconnect disconnect it from that automatic feeling, that trigger, right? So how do you do that? You have to feel your feelings. You have to create a safe and welcome place for that feeling to come up in your body. And what happens is we're often really scared to do that, or we don't know how, or we resist the emotion. A lot of people think, I don't have time to feel like shit right now. I got to sleep. I got to work. I got to take care of my kids, whatever, right? What I want to offer is that you must find ways to just let that feeling exist without trying to change it, without trying to fix it, without trying to shove it under a rug, without trying to distract away from it, without trying to drink over it, to numb it, right? And this is why I coach people for 6 months at a time, is because there's a lot here to unpack and how to learn how to actually do this. But if I can help you in this video by just saying like, try to just feel your feeling. And what that actually means is like, get into your body and start to figure out what the physical sensation actually is. Just identifying it, just letting it exist, right? So a really good one that comes up with noisy neighbors and that we tend to resist and not want to feel is anxiety. And when we resist anxiety, it gets worse. It can turn into panic. It can turn into depression. It can turn into anger, all these things. But when you really just let yourself feel your anxiety and you ask yourself some questions like, where is it in my body? Okay, for me, anxiety kind of lives like in my solar plexus and my chest, and then my shoulders get tight. And then you ask yourself something like, what does it look like? And if you can visualize, like, what is it? Is it a hand squeezing? Is it a big rock? Is it a lump? Is it a puddle of mud? Like, is it dripping paint? Like, what does it look like? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Does it have a shape? Does it have a temperature, right? You ask yourself all of this. And the only purpose of this is to just get out of your brain and fear and to just recognize that like your body can process this emotion and you're just observing it, right? You're just watching it happen. And then that is when that feeling, you start to realize, one, that you can handle it, right? This thing we spend so much time running from, we actually have the capacity to handle it, right? It can feel intense. A lot of my clients have described it actually feels like it's worse, but I would offer that you're just like really feeling it for the first time and you've never experienced it before. And so it just feels intense, right? So watch out about how you're thinking about it. Like, okay, this is okay. I'm okay. Tell yourself that. Keep a hand on your heart while you're doing this, or on the stomach, wherever you feel that feeling. And the second thing, so the first thing is you notice your capacity to handle it. You can handle it. And the second thing is that it will dissipate, right? If you notice, whenever you are resisting a feeling, it doesn't go away. It gets worse, right? Like you might be able to like repress it or shove it down or ignore it for a while, but it's going to flare up, right? And when you start to practice just feeling it and processing it, you're going to notice that, oh my God, it dissipates. This is what people talk about when they say letting it move through you. This is what it's talking about when it's like ride that wave. Like if you've ever heard that in relation to your emotions, right? And now this is very much like me trying to tell you how to ride a bike without you ever getting on a bike and pedaling. So I can tell you everything about how to feel a feeling and how to process it, but until you're willing to really sit down the next time you feel an emotion and try to just experience what it might be like to let it exist within you, you're not going to know what the fuck I'm talking about. So try it. You can do it in small time frames. A lot of people are afraid of being consumed by the feeling, or like, I'm never going to get anything done because I'm feeling my feelings all the time. It doesn't have to be like that. You can practice just setting a timer for 5 minutes a day to just let whatever's there arise. Or if you do have the time and the space in the middle of it, in the moment, give yourself a minute, give yourself a beat to just stand for a second and just see like, oh, this is that feeling, right? And letting it just kind of be there before moving on. You don't need a ton of time to do this. Now, there is another, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to try to keep this under 15 minutes, but I do want to say there's another crucial point if you're doing this work around feeling your feelings. Observing it, identifying it, naming it, describing it. Very, very important. But then you must move into, and this doesn't have to take very much time either. This is so important, is to soothe it. Soothe your body. Soothe yourself. What we're doing when we're letting the feeling process through us is we are honoring the physical experience. And we are physical beings, obviously. We're animals, and our nervous system needs to have that moment where we're just kind of letting it move through us. And then we need to soothe it. So a really good way to do that is EFT tapping. One of my favorites. I'm getting certified in it too, by the way. So if you're interested in that, follow me, send me a message, connect with me, because I'm going to be implementing that in my coaching. So emotional freedom technique. If you want to check that out, it's tapping. You might have seen people doing it. It's all this. Brad Yates has a great channel on YouTube. Check it out. It's free. It's wildly effective. I used it so much when I was going through my noisy neighbor experience. Humming, rocking, dancing. There's like ecstatic dance. There's dance meditation stuff you can do to like move it. If you watch animals after they get in a fight, like geese, oh my God, there's this park and I love it. And the geese are always fighting. They're brutal. But after they're done, they just like shake. They shake it off. Dogs do it too. I think most animals have a way of just kind of like shaking. And then they're off, right? They don't have the trauma. They don't have grudges or resentments, right? It's because they use their bodies to get out of that. Another thing while we're talking about animals and the earth and stuff is earthing, getting outside, getting barefoot on the ground. Now is the time where the weather's getting better. You can actually do that. Put your feet on the ground, get in some water if you can, even if it's just a bath or your shower. Get in nature, get into the forest, just be outside. That's really soothing. Fuzzy blankets, tea. We're not just talking self-care here. Like a lot of time when we talk about self-care, people get these images of like indulgent spa days or whatever, and those definitely have their place. But what we're looking for is like, you've experienced what your emotion feels like in your body, and then you're basically asking your body like what it needs. Sometimes it needs a nap. Sometimes it wants to punch a pillow. Sometimes it needs that tea and the fuzzy blanket and like a stuffed animal. Sometimes it needs the hot shower. Sometimes it needs to make art. Sometimes it wants to dance. Sometimes it wants to stretch. Sometimes it needs yoga. It might need kickboxing. It might need running around the block. Like, you get to decide where your energy's at and what's going to help you release it after you've gotten to know it a little bit and feel it. So I really hope this video helps. I want to wrap it up now. But I think this is going to kind of like fill in that gap for those of you who are kind of like, I cannot think my way out of this. I cannot come up with a more positive thought about the situation. My guess is that you've got some trauma kind of coupled to the circumstance of noisy neighbors. And if you will let yourself be safe to feel those emotions, I think that might be a part that you might be skipping. I know I skipped over it for a long time. And when I started doing that, the thought work got a lot more effective. And I also really want to encourage you to get help, like whether it's a life coach, hello, hire me. And you can just contact me for a free consultation call before you make a decision about that. You can just see what's coaching like, how would I help? What would it be like to work together, right? We can get on the phone or on a Zoom call for free to just talk about that. But get therapy if you need it. Get a friend to support you through this if you need it. Look for another place to live if you need it. And don't discount, don't tell yourself that you're stuck, that you're trapped, right? If there is one thought that I could plant, even as you're working through the emotions part of it, right, is just don't believe that you're trapped. Because when you believe that you're stuck, you can't afford it, you end up creating this whole other layer of like impossibility and despair, and you're unable to see opportunities to get out of it. So there is a way out, whether it's escaping through your own mind by healing a lot of this stuff and then they just don't bother you anymore. Or if it is time to move, you will call in the funds, you will call in the people to support you. You'll find a way, but you have to keep that window of possibility open just a crack. So you don't have to believe that you'll find the perfect situation right now, especially if you don't have a job or you feel broke or whatever. But if you want it, if you want something different, if you want something better, let yourself at least entertain the possibility that it could get better for you, and it will. All right, I hope this helps. I'm going to put my email address in the comments if you want to set up your consultation or talk more. If you have any questions, anything like that, reach out. I'm also on Facebook. I'll pop that link in there. I do a lot of written stuff that helps with all kinds of mindset work and feeling feels and all of that. So if you're interested in this work, if I'm speaking your language, come hang out with me on Facebook and email me and connect and let's talk. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.